Well, welcome to World Dairy Expo and our dairy buyer panel, customer and consumer expectations on sustainability. At the end of the day, everything that we're doing in the genetic community is for consumers, right? So that's the important translation here from the people that we have working very hard on genetics and into the sustainability part here. On behalf of the World Dairy Expo Board of Directors, too, I'd like to welcome you to World Dairy Expo, and thank you for being here. I know we have a number of international attendees in the audience, and I'd really like to have them stand. And please stand and recognize, you put the world into World Dairy Expo. There's a lot of red ribbons here. Our friends from Brazil, your international guests, please stand. Please. We plan to use a talk show format here for our dairy buyer panel, and that'll allow us to develop some great audience interaction and answer the most pressing matters on your mind. Before we get going, I'm going to discuss the sustainability topic a little bit larger here. We're going to get our plane up to 30,000 feet. Many of us pride ourselves in owning and operating multi-generational businesses. And it's our goal to run a thriving business to financially support our families in the near term and to be outstanding caretakers over the long haul, so one day that our next generation may have an opportunity to pass the family farm on to our children. The latter definitely requires us to be outstanding stewards of our farm's precious resources. The key word is stewards. While no one bristles at the notion of being good caretakers and practicing good stewardship on our family farms, the word sustainability doesn't sit well with some of us. Not only do some in the dairy community have skepticism about the sustainability topic, some among us have shared that the word is overused, misused, or even abused and has many definitions. We get it. None of us wants to be told what to do. And it can feel like at times sustainability movement is being forced down our throats. Let's for a second take the word sustainability and toss it to the curb. Let's refocus on stewardship. As you think about the producers you know and work with, or if you're a producer yourself in the room, would any of you among us argue with the following statements? Dairy farmers want to be the best stewards of my farm's land and water resources. Dairy farmers want to be the best stewards of employees, consultants, and vendors who work on my farm. Dairy farmers want to be the best stewards dairy farmers want to be the best steward of my farm's produce and products ultimately purchased by consumers. Nearly everyone would say yes to those statements. If that's the case, you believe in stewardship. However, a communication hurdle remains. Consumers don't relate to the word stewardship. Customers care about sustainability. Since our customers care about sustainability, the people who buy our dairy products, we should care about sustainability too. Like it or not, we must speak the language of our customers and share how our dairies are sustainable. Pick your word, sustainability or stewardship. It's a trend that's here to stay, and that's why this topic is at the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding session. Let's meet our panelists who are going to bring a great deal of expertise to this pivotal discussion. We will invite each speaker to respond to an opening question. Their responses will be through the lens of the organizations for which they represent and their career perspective. Following the question and answer session, we will have a robust session that will be driven by you, the audience. We're going to use a program called Slido.com. That's you can use your smartphones for this, Slido, Slido.com. Once again, it's Slido.com, and when you get to that, you're going to use the event code. This is going to be real easy and intuitive, I hope. CDCB 22. Council Dairy Cattle Breeding 22. CDCB 22. So you ask a question in that platform. You can ask it anonymously. And if, for example, Joe asks a question and Amy likes it, she can give a thumbs up. So you and the audience can rank the questions that we are going to answer. And so we will turn first to our first panelist, Brian Zook, closest to me, is Director of Milk Sourcing and Dairy Sustainability at Bell Brands USA. In the food world, that means Brian is a protein buyer. For US-based audience customers, you'll recognize Bell Brands by some of their well-known cheeses, such as Mini Baby Bell, the Laughing Cow, and Bosson. Brian is based out of the company's Chicago office, and he oversees and manages all milk sourcing for Bell Brands USA. He also leads the company's dairy sustainability goals and science-based target initiatives for greenhouse gases and the carbon footprint reduction. In addition to working for Bell Brands USA, Brian is a committee chair for the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy. A veteran of the food industry, Brian has previously held procurement roles at the Kellogg Company, Bay Valley Foods, and Land O'Lakes. Brian, two groups of people are driving interest on sustainability: consumers and shareholders. That shareholder group includes both investor and regulatory community. What's your perspective when it comes to long-term impacts for both dairy producers and dairy processors? More importantly, how can dairy meet the sustainability challenge?
Thank you, Corey. Yes, from the lens of the products that we're putting out, we're currently seeing from the consumer standpoint a desire to put lower carbon products in the store shelf, but also store buyers demanding lower carbon or a carbon footprint story to get your product on the shelf. We're already seeing this in other countries where that's table stakes to get your product on the shelf. So luckily for us here in the United States, we were blessed with the foresight that the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy and Dairy Management, Inc. many years ago started the Net Zero Initiative to bring dairy down to a net zero by 2050 that was announced 2 years ago. We also have a National Milk Farmers Assuring Responsible Management on-farm system that has an environmental stewardship module. That's a globally recognized method of measuring the carbon footprint on our dairies. And I've been using that on our dairies that's supplying milk to me for the past 3 years. And I can say so far we are seeing about a 6.5% to 7% reduction in carbon footprint over the past 3 years. As a science-based target company, we are going to comply with COP26 protocol. COP26 protocol is a 1.5 degree increase. We will need, as dairy supplying me product, a 50% reduction in on-farm greenhouse gas by 2035. I've been able to measure and document that, and I think we're on a path to make it there, and luckily we're provided with that. From the investor side, if we look at what's moving in the store, dairy needs to understand you're a protein. And the competition on protein is also now including plant-based dairy proteins and cellular-based dairy proteins. And that's gaining market share. And that's gaining demand. And we've had to provide plant-based, and next year we'll have cellular-based products alongside our dairy products in the store shelf. As a food manufacturer, we have to make food out of what sells. Store buyers will demand from us food made from what is selling. So we are determined on the consumer demand to lead us into new product development.
So if you want to ask a question early, please again go to slido.com, SLIDO.com, event code CDCB22. Slido.com, event code CDCB22. Again, audience, you can give questions a thumbs up. In these circles, our next panelist needs no introduction. You may not have seen him here for a few years at World Dairy Expo, but candidly speaking, Mike Brown may just be one of the most unique people in our dairy industry. He's seen every sector from about every angle possible. He started out as a member of the Virginia Tech Hokies dairy judging team, and he were at an IDFA meeting yesterday. Your Hokies won the national title here on Sunday night.
Good.
By a 44-point margin. Caitlin,
Wow.
yeah, they smoked them.
That's good because the football team isn't doing quite as well.
And this ag economist then worked for National All Jersey for 11 years. Then he went to Dairy Gold out in the Pacific Northwest, where he headed up member services for that dairy cooperative. After that endeavor, Mike joined the Irish-owned Glanbia, where its New Mexico and Idaho plants specialize in American-style cheese and whey proteins. For the past 7 years, Mike has been director of supply chain for the Kroger company, certainly one of the largest grocers in the United States. Mike, I do know this, you rarely pull any punches on a topic, and share your candid thoughts here with our audience. While dairy can win with its quality proteins, its flavor, and short ingredient list on many labels, dairy has competition, and it must respond to that competition when it comes to sustainability and climate change. Share your thoughts on that matter from both your dairy farm boy background and as a person who now represents one of the nation's leading grocers.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. It's fun to talk about genetics again, since I haven't really talked about it in 18 years. So it's kind of fun to see what's happening. I'm very really enjoyed the update this morning. It kind of got me back into the groove. One thing I noticed right away, we got to get away from talking about milk production to fat and protein production, because that's the real efficiency measure. If you look at how producers are paying, or people are paid for milk, and we see it in the response. I mean, what we've seen with, this year, milk production is down, fat production is up almost 2%. So dairymen are very good, and they're going to respond to market. Well, and the market for dairy is still very, very strong, and I think that's the first thing I'd like to start with. There's a lot of new technologies. We're going to see how they scale with cost. I think that's a big issue with our consumers. Kroger is a very diverse grocery store as far as what we try to do for customers. Everything from value products to high-end or more unique kind of products, and the customer base changes depending what you're at. One other thing we see with customer base is younger folks, Gen Zs, and I hate those kind of terms, but the younger ones. But I'm a baby boomer, so I don't know anything anymore. So, but anyway, what we see with them is certainly more interest in the plant-based, some of the alternative items. I see a kind of unique thing. They're all they don't like genetically modified things, but yet we're talking about milk proteins that are going to be made by genetic modified things. My thing on that has always been, well, if you have a relative that takes insulin, be grateful that we figured out a way to do that, because that's really important to people. I'm from a family of chubby people, so trust me, we all know about that. But beyond that, what we really see is, at this point, it's still really a niche market. It is growing. We see, particularly in the, we've had a lot of hype in the last few years on plant meats. They are flat to falling in interest at this point. Part of it right now, we're in a recession, and most of those products are premium. And one thing we're seeing is people are going back to the basics because of cost. Kroger carries pretty much all national brands, including Baby Bells, which are one of my favorite snack while I travel cheeses, because they're very handy and better for me than keeping a Hershey bar in the glove box. But what we see is that they're going back to basics. Will that change? But it all comes down to efficiency. And one of the things I enjoyed hearing this morning was that a couple of things. The science. Kroger very much believes that whatever we do, whether it's with greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's with sustainability, has to be science-based. We also believe we need to work collaboratively as an industry. We are not very excited about everybody having their own little special program. One reason we've been very strong supporters and participants in the farm program and development of that program, because to me, farm basically, you talked about, and we heard about this morning, we talked about, feet on cows and productive life, all those kind of things. To me, farm basically supports that. It also gives us a way to talk to consumers. If we do have an issue with the dairy, we have a program to rectify that. It's extremely important. I can just imagine my dad in the 70s being told he had to do farm. The air would be blue. He was a former Army guy. He could cuss. But it is important today for our consumers. It does bring a level of comfort. As far as genetics, I've been a believer in net merit since the day it was first discussed, and I think that is a tool that's going to give us the efficiencies we need. Basically, cows live longer, and are competitive in production. They're the most profitable cows. Part of that is net merit because it considers herd life, basically shows replacement rates you need, how many cattle you need to keep your herd full. We think that's important. But the big thing at Kroger is because we're so large, we have tens of thousands of suppliers. We work with 8 different milk co-ops for milk, more than that for cheese and other products, of course. And so how we do this, we think it needs to be collaborative. We are not interested in being unique or different. We think we need to have industry standards. From the standpoint, going back to my love of cattle genetics, go back to when Jim Cavanaugh ran the Jersey Association. God, that's a long time ago now. That's the 80s. And told me the fellow that ran the Shorthorn, was it Clampett, said, find the functionally efficient, high-producing cow and learn to like the way she looks. I believe that's what net merit has done for us. It's found that cow that lasts, they aren't always the prettiest cows. I think we find net merit shown indirectly that size isn't as important as we thought it was. And I think that's the kind of thing long-term for our customers. They want us to have an efficient industry with healthy animals. We do not see dairy going away. We do see, obviously, the greenhouse gas issues, the ESG issues that we're going to be having more. We're certainly getting pressure from our investors. We're a publicly traded company on those kinds of issues. What are we doing? And right now the tools are crude. You know, we're trying to measure scope 3, which is the greenhouse gas emission from basically farm to factory before we buy the products. We're doing it by dollars. I said, how can you do it by dollars? Because milk price is high, so if milk prices go down next year, we're going to have less emissions. They go up, we're going to have more. It's kind of silly. It's got to be units or per unit of component, protein, fat, whatever it may be. But we're all still really working with those tools. The U.S., as you I think are well aware and probably have heard, particularly in the world of world dairy trade, we do not have the limitations yet that New Zealand has, and particularly the EU has, as far as emissions caps. When I was at Glanbia, that really wasn't an issue in Ireland. Now it is, and it's obviously a very, very big concern. So we at this point, I think we have a chance in this industry to grow. As far as advice, I'm curious what we learn long term as far as for greenhouse gases. What is the genetic portion of that? You know, with genomics, we can do things a lot easier than we used to. But how are we going to measure it to determine which gene on the genes impact that? I currently believe going for efficiency is still the key in looking at it. I think those of you who are familiar with New Zealand industry, they've looked at that for a long time because that's why their cows are smaller, that's why they're browner. I can assure you the reason that we're over 4% fat isn't just because of Holsteins. You get into North Dakota, you get into Idaho, cows are black and brown, crossbreds. More and more and more of them, which I think is also a challenge as we identify genetics and how we best measure that. I know, obviously, there's been a lot of effort to how do we put that into the equations. But in the end, our consumers are going to demand the efficiency. They're going to demand that we have healthy animals that are fairly treated. And with greenhouse gases, they're still struggling with it, what it means, just like we are. But long term, it will be part of the picture. As far as competitors to dairy, dairy is pretty efficient compared to a lot of your animal proteins. Environmentally efficient is bacteria-produced casein? Probably not, but you also have to get the cost structure of that to a point where it's competitive. And if I have to pay for dairy proteins like I pay for my insulin, it's not very price competitive, I can assure you that. So that's kind of my opening. So we're interested. It's across our entire business, not just dairy, obviously. And we have seen consumers certainly embrace, but it's still at this point a small part of the market, but it's the younger folks that are really showing the most interest in understanding sustainability, and they're obviously going to become a bigger share of our customer base.
We're going to go with 2 questions we talked about in advance, and then we're going to go straight to audience questions. And Mike started touching on this to quite a bit of degree, but Brian, I'm going to throw this one to you. Let's talk about other components of the business proposition. From your perspective, how is dairy different from some of the other supply chains you work with?
Well, if we want to look at converting dairy proteins from an investor standpoint, dairy is somewhat unique in that for every $1 worth of dairy, it requires $1 worth of processing. So if you have $5 billion worth of dairies in one area, it's going to take $5 billion worth of processing to convert that into protein. Not so with plant-based. You can take $5 billion worth of farmland and convert that in a $200 million plant into plant-based proteins. Cellular-based proteins doesn't require any agricultural base. So if we look at just the efficiency of where your dollar goes to or where you're going to invest your processing, that puts dairy at somewhat a challenging investment opportunity if you're an investor, but doing a supply chain. Now, there's some advantages, and we'll exploit that on plant-based versus dairy-based as far as complete protein, mineral, and things of that nature. And yes, I agree with Mike. It's not just straight milk production; it's fat and protein matter. And I buy protein. I don't buy milk. I need protein to make cheese. So I don't care if it comes in half the amount of milk or, I only pay for protein coming through my door. So that's what I'm focused on. So the efficiency of the animal, net merit, yes. But also I think as we work with you folks and work with the whole dairy supply chain on the solution for carbon, our carbon footprint, the United States is unique in that we dairy on every kind of geography there is within our country. We farm in the desert. We dairy on top of mountains. We're down in the bayous. We're in the Midwest. It's not going to be one solution. It's going to be a combination, depending on whether you have access to pasture, whether you're in the desert. It's all going to be different. So, we need to measure that, a good measuring device, and to see a genetic solution may be a portion of it in the dairy, but in the desert, but it may not work so much in the Midwest, and that might be a feed additive component. It's not going to be one size fit all. And that's what we all need to work together as we move towards a solution to be coordinated and not just silo ourselves with genetics versus the feed additive folks versus the farming technique folks.
You have anything to add on that one, Mike?
Yeah, a little bit. If you're running a dairy sourcing like my team does, we buy almost $2 billion worth of products a year. It's landing cost into warehouse is our primary thing. What does it cost to get their product to a distribution center? So location does matter. I think we're finding more and more, particularly as people move from fluid milk, there's just new numbers on consumption for 2021. Dairy consumption in the U.S. is up again. But of course, guess what? Cheese is up and fluid milk is down. So, and I can tell you one thing for sure, if people want to buy, I can move cheese a lot cheaper than I can move milk because it's basically 10-to-1 ratio. With tests going up, it's going to be 11-to-1 before too long, the way components are increasing in the U.S. dairy supply. So location becomes less of an issue. But when we're talking, again, back to the point, and there has been a lot of investment, and think about this. If you go to the grocery store and buy a 16-ounce Coke, it's going to cost you probably 50 cents more than a 16-ounce container of milk. What do you think the cost of ingredients difference is? It's the other way. And so investors are certainly interested in those value-added products. Where can I get the At the same time, we have to have consumer pull for those products, and I think the plant meats right now, we're kind of seeing that, that the consumers haven't totally engaged and aren't ready to accept that, and in Broadway, we certainly have very loyal consumers for those products. But a longer term, it is a function of cost, it is a function of margin, but on the same time, we run a grocery store chain, we're going to sell what people want to buy, and it's our job to make sure it's done as efficiently and environmentally responsible as it possibly can be. But it would be dishonest to say that alternatives to animal proteins aren't going to continue to be an opportunity. One of the things I've been, a good example, my team actually buys plant beverages. I refuse to call them milks. So you can, for slightly more money, get 2 grams of protein instead of 8 per serving with almond milk, for example. Do I have an opinion? Yeah, I'm afraid I kind of do. But, how do we address that consumer need? Because where our growth is, let's take milk for an example. You talk about fluid milk components don't matter. Where's the growth? High protein milks. I mean, Fairlife is a $1 billion brand now. People want those, they want those products, so how do we do that efficiently as well? But we cannot ignore, and I think we're behind Europe as far as expectations even from the grocery business. But these efficiencies, and really from us, a lot of it is investor driven. It's going to be continue to be an important part of our business. Ironically, some of our more naturally produced products actually have a higher carbon footprint because cows are less efficient and the products move farther. But no one wants to think about that.
We're going to go to some audience questions. We're going to save a few of them that are coming in for our future panels here. We have Marilyn Hershey in the back of the room. I know the top question on Slido is going to be better for her, and a couple for our genetics panel from dairy producers. I think so many of us in here understand what happens from the dairy farm right about till it gets to the processing plant. So really, Brian sells product to Mike, and I just want to briefly talk a little bit about that, explain that, Brian, your interaction with a chain like Kroger, and then I'm going to have a quick follow-up to Mike, because I really want everybody to appreciate the volume of business that's up here.
Right, so milk gets delivered to my plant. Moves off the dairy and goes to me. I will make finished goods for Kroger. It'll come out the end of my plant, barcoded, tagged, and ready for the retail store shelf. So the store, Kroger, has their own buyers for each section of the store, and they have a dairy buyer. And they choose to put what products they want in their dairy case based on how well we sell, how much we sell, and the velocity at which that product moves. And we come to them with propositions and new innovation items, new flavors and things of that nature, and they come to us with telling us what's selling. And they'll purchase that direct, and I'll go straight into his distribution system.
Mike, start out with how many stores you have in how many states?
35 states, about 2,760 stores. We're the largest retail grocery chain. We're not the largest retail grocery sales company, and you all can guess who that is. But we are the biggest. We are the biggest, mostly dedicated to groceries. So we're very large. We have lots of local brands. If you're in Seattle and buy products at Fred Meyer, or in Boise buy at Fred Meyer, that's a Kroger company. If you buy at Ralph's in Southern California, that's your Kroger company. Fry's in Arizona is a Kroger company. King Super in Colorado is. So we have, but the predominant, our business is prominently east. It's been around since 1883, founded in Cincinnati, Ohio. In fact, where it was founded is where the football stadium sits. So it's right down by the river. So that's our size. As far as where we go, obviously we work with companies like Bell Brands. They make great products. We have a lot of consumer support for those products. And we basically source 2 different ways. My job, Kroger has, you may not know this, we actually have 16 dairy plants. We have 13 fluid milk, ice cream, cottage cheese, cultured product plants, 1 dedicated ice cream plant that also, by the way, makes soda pop. So we call that the root beer float plant. And then we have 2 cheese cut and wraps. We have a very large cheese packaging business, a plant in Rochester, Minnesota, and one in Indiana. So we are both manufacturers and buyers. And as manufacturers, we have to compete with both national brands for shelf space in the store and also other people who make products for us with Kroger brand. And we manufacture roughly 40% of our total sales in Kroger brands products. The other 60% is purchased from other suppliers. And it's price, it's reliability. I think it's really important in the last couple of years, and you've all dealt with this too, is continual supply. We have actually changed sourcing in my team, because I'm a data nerd, we actually calculate what your out-of-stock cost has been to Kroger, and when you bid, because it's competitive bids, we adjust that bid, and we've actually changed suppliers over it, because you can't make any money with an empty shelf. All you're going to do is make a consumer mad. So that's really, really important. And we can be guilty of it ourselves too. I mean, there's been packaging shortages. Right now, carbon dioxide. We can't make soda pop because you can't get carbon dioxide. It's short.
And what's that the byproduct of? I mean, explain, I mean,
Yep.
take the microphone. This is why carbon dioxide is in short supply. We're talking compressed carbon dioxide. Brian, go.
Right, that's Ukraine war. And nitrogen-based carbon dioxide manufacturing. It's a function of what, why the world is short of fertilizer. It was the majority of it goes through. So, also trying to put together a budget for next year. We're a global company. The United States represents about 25% of what Bell Brands does globally. And we, in North America, you really feel gifted putting together a budget for 23 when I'm looking at about a 6% increase for natural gas at our plants, and my colleagues overseas in Europe are looking at about 150% increase, and electrical bill that's gone up 750% from it. So what are you going to burn your energy for to make? Are you going to make cheese? So we're seeing bakers shut down in Western Europe, and also reduce your SKUs. Better utilize your efficiency by making less SKUs. I mean, Mike and I'm sure we both all did it during the COVID Hoard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we reduced our SKU so we could, bang more cheese out the back of our plant and less time stop between SKUs. Less variety, and you notice that on the shelf. But all that goes to efficiency. It's all about efficiency. Yeah.
We're going to go to speed round here. We got 10 minutes left. So the first question is going to be, and we're going to kick it to Mike. I'm going to bounce these around, and if you have something to add, if you're the opposite, you're going to jump in. All right. What is the growth in protein being led by retailers because margin is higher?
It's read by consumer poll. Yeah. It's what consumers want to buy. I will tell you this, the more we concentrate protein in a dairy product, the better the margin is, which tells you consumers are willing to pay for it. The lowest margin part of our grocery store is fluid milk. When I worked for Dairy Gold, and they're in the fluid business, I always said fluid milk is powder in a bottle. It is a commodity. We have commoditized that product. That is changing, whether it be, we have what we call our private selection. They're indulgent milks. They're like basically a melted milkshake, and they're really tasty. And my doctor says I can't have them, but they're really, really good. That's a growing business. The protein growing. Other thing that's growing is longer shelf life products. Consumers like that convenience. And in that area, it's again, our population is getting older and browning. It's lactose free, is a lot of the growth. So,
anything to add on that one, Brian?
No, but just one point that came up that reminded me. Last year we crossed the Rubicon in the United States dairy. That's when our exports on milk equivalents surpassed our fluid milk consumption in the United States. So it's not just the United States consumer, it's the world consumer. And who's the number one consumer of milk protein in the world market from the United States? It's China. So we are not our own island anymore. We have to respond to the world consumer and not just the United States.
Brian, hold on to the microphone there. And this one may be a little bit more for Maryland, but does the dairy industry do a good job in PR and communication, or where can we improve the reach with more people in our story? And probably a little bit more of a sustainability twist on this question.
Well, if I look over the different proteins and different segments of U.S. agriculture, I think, I pointed out that the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy and Dairy Management, Inc. I believe do a wonderful job promoting dairy and dairy protein, and they work very closely with U.S. DEC, Dairy Export Council. We try to work with them on joint public relations opportunities to promote United States dairy. I believe that they do as well a job, if not better, than most our dairy. I do know they have the committee members, and there's some here on the next panel coming up, do a very good job moving U.S. dairy to keep them competitive. Adding the environmental stewardship module to measure your greenhouse gases. Biodiversity is the next one coming in. These are the things that dairy needs to move to stay competitive with your other alternative proteins, and I think they do a well job.
I'm just going to second and say of all the animal proteins, dairy is by far the most sophisticated.
Yes.
Great support. We're also members of I'm not the person on it, of the Innovation Center. I am an advisory member to the DMI board, but they're trying to think ahead of where the consumer is going, and we rely on them. We're a very large company. Their resources and their talent is really important to Kroger, very important to Kroger.
Mike, I'm going to give you this question because you bridged all the way back in the genetics sphere here. What is the industry, and you guys would be the processing and retail industry perception toward gene editing applied to dairy cows, such as heat-tolerant genes or pole genetics? And we're talking about gene editing within the species, not bringing outside genes in.
Like CRISPR kind of stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I laugh that we're okay with bacteria-produced casein, but we still are struggling with all these other products. It started out, I remember back, I was at Dairy Gold, we had a cloned Holstein cow, and we couldn't take their milk because of customer pushback when that became a big issue. Was it silly? Of course it was silly. But there's lots of things that we've changed in time that are probably pretty silly. So we don't have a define on that yet. We actually support, because of the obvious push from animal rights groups, we do certainly support increasing the polled gene population. As a cow breeder and a Jersey guy who knows a lot about polled cows, had them back in the 60s, for heaven's sakes. I'm old enough to have actually owned them in the 60s. It's a pretty small pool. Perhaps, again, the way we can identify genes today in genomics, we can do a better job with some of that diversity. But for us, it is something that we have not taken positions on. We like to be science-based. We basically have deferred. Basically, we're looking at that stuff. We have not made any, but no one has approached us and said, will you accept that product or not? We generally find RBST is a great example. Until the national brands decided in cheese to make an issue out of a mountain out of a molehill, it was a fluid milk issue. We were RBST free in fluid milk because we had to be, sadly. But cheese we weren't until some of our friends in Illinois and Wisconsin decided they were going to market it that way. So it is more of its marketing sometimes than good science, I'm afraid. Mm-hmm.
So in the United States, 92%, I'm going to frame this next question for Brian and Mike, 92% of the milk is priced on multiple component pricing. So we're talking protein, butter, fat, and other solids. So a lot of people in America and around the world are eating their dairy products, be it cheese or butter and those things. However, in the fluid space, there's a lot of buzz about A2 milk. So one of the audience questions is, and so you guys focus a bit more on hard products, Mike a little bit more on fluid, but what's your perception on A2 milk?
It has a very small, loyal support. Generally, I'll give you an indication. Generally, if you see a product that's gaining strong support, Kroger will try to develop its own brand of that product. We are not doing that with A2 milk at this time.
The market share doesn't generate it.
Go ahead, Brian.
It really doesn't at this point.
So the market share doesn't generate. I'm a cheese guy. No one's asking me for A2 cheese. Thank God. Let's keep that on.
Well, I have friends that milk cows. Would be glad to help you out if you need the milk, because they can't get it in the fluid bottle.
One crisis at a time.
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, we're approaching, we got 3 minutes left here, and I think this is a great summation question here, because we are speaking with a group of genetics people from around the world here. So the question, you guys can decide who grabs this one first. How can we leverage the huge amount of genetic progress we've made to develop a positive sustainability image? For example, we've doubled the fat and protein production with half the cows, if you took a certain standpoint and snapshot in time. So I'll toss that one up. Who wants to grab it first?
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I have an opinion, but yeah, we've become much more efficient. I think the biggest thing is, and that is used. I mean, do we have, signs above the dairy case saying cows are twice as efficient as they were in 1942? No, we don't. But it's certainly, and it's part, and when we start looking at greenhouse gas and carbon footprint, that efficiency, again, the presentation before this, again, thank you for that review. I feel like I'm a little bit caught up now. I'm not quite so dangerous talking about genetics now. It's certainly of importance. It's not maybe directly, but it's part of the bigger picture of efficiency. Because one of the struggles we have with consumers, they still think a dairy cow should be in a barn with 40 stalls that's painted red with a gambrel roof and an old wood silo outside, like my dad had. That's, we continue to work with people to understand that. One thing I will tell you is we're seeing animal care, efficiency, environmental becoming a bigger concern of consumers. They're becoming more acceptance of large herds because they understand the efficiencies. And I always tell people, it's kind of like a restaurant. If you have a family restaurant and it grows, is that a sin? If you're good at dairying and you grow, that just means you're good at what you do. And so we use that message.
I would just say for the people in this room is, myself, I do a lot of work with the Innovation Center. It's a team. You're a portion of the solution that we're all going for, and we all need to, do our part. So your participation within the industry events and work with the National Milk, people and the FARM people will measure the components and the good work of what you're doing, and that would be how you best keep your best foot forward and help us all go to the same goal, and that's keeping dairy on the shelf and in the consumer's hands.
Let's give Brian and Mike a round of applause for joining us today. I hope you really appreciate the insight they brought to a genetic discussion here. We did a little bit of a pre-talk, the three of us with Amy, and huddled about it because this is a really important story. And again, it's why we're all doing what we do here. The genetics are what make the good dairy products for consumers in the United States and around the world. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Zhao before we have a break.